I hear the sounds of your heartbeat. I can hear it now. I can hear it now. I hear the sounds of your heartbeat. I can hear it now. I can hear it now. I hear the sounds of your heartbeat. I can hear it now. I can hear it now.
All right, so we're on take two with Kelly Lorencz here. We had some technical difficulties yesterday, so I think we're going to start back from the very beginning and see how far we can make it through. So our initial chat, we were having a couple of glitches where Kelly was freezing, but overall 100%, 1,000% better over what it was yesterday. So thanks again for taking some time to have a conversation with me here, Kelly. And I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to go through the introduction of yourself again, and we'll hopefully spend a lot less time talking about internet.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Take two. So you got to love this technology. So my name is Kelly Lorencz. I was born and raised in Regina, Saskatchewan. Spent high school there. Did various things throughout my life. Went and joined the military, and then from the military was in corrections. So I spent 7 years in the military, almost 15 years in federal corrections, and I've been pretty involved in the political game, I guess you want to call it, I enjoy doing shows like this because it initiates a conversation, and far too often these days we're scared to have that conversation, or we're scared to have that truth and that transparency. So I look forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, and I'd seen that portion of one of my live streams done with a couple of other guys, just going over the AstraZeneca information has been censored off of YouTube, which is kind of interesting. I haven't gotten any notifications. Of course, I wouldn't really know where to look for them. But yeah, apparently when we went over the abortion or the fetuses, spontaneous aborted fetuses, that portion of the information seems to not want to be broadcast anymore, even though it's a fully published, phase 3 clinical trials published by the manufacturer themselves. They don't want you having the conversations. And I don't think it's just there that we're seeing some reluctance on conversations. And I think that people have gotten, I'm going to say, a little soft. They've gotten a little delicate to either the name calling or not wanting to upset the neighbors. So we're going along to get along, but that keeps us away from having a lot of the conversations that I think Canadians want to be having. So a really big part of, what I do here on my podcast, and a little bit more of, I think what you're going to be talking about at the Vets for Freedom event in Red Deer on the 15th, right?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. I mean, right now, as a country, as a community, and even as families, we're afraid to have that conversation, and fear has consumed us. Whether you're going to hurt my one feeling, or we're afraid to say or be honest with what we feel. We don't have to agree. That's the whole purpose of having a conversation and debate. We don't have to agree, but we still have to have that conversation, and sometimes these conversations are difficult. But fear is always there, and I guess we have to ask ourselves: are we willing to overcome this fear, or are we going to allow it to continue to control us?
Yeah, and in all fairness, I'm not going to say that everybody that doesn't speak up in the political circles is a wussy. And prior to Trudeau, I was as complicit in my complacency in just really not giving that much of a crap about what was going on in the political scene. Having gone through a couple of the minor recessions and the global bankruptcy with mortgages and what was that, 2008. I mean, that impacted a lot of people, and we managed to skate through that fairly unscathed. Unlike the slow boiling that we're seeing with the Liberal government on our communities and Seeing all these empty businesses and going to gutted portions of downtown where nothing can exist. Seeing the
Mhm.
number of big stores that have closed, like even places like the Army and Navy. I mean, that place has been around forever. And yeah, they didn't sell a lot of high quality stuff. And yeah, maybe like the new Dollaramas and dollar stores have taken over some of their marketplace. But watching institutional companies like that buckle inside of Canada is quite terrible.
You know what? It's scary, and the biggest concern that I have, we have those box stores or chain stores that they're going under, and for me, that just shows me that they had a poor business model to begin with. Um, Either that, or the government has been pushing harder and harder on them, and is forcing them into bankruptcy. But even bigger than that, in my mind, is the mom and pop stores, the mom and pop shops that are struggling to survive. Families depend on their livelihoods on these stores, and it's becoming more and more difficult. I know here in Alberta, there's a coffee shop not far from Red Deer here where the police have been there repeatedly on violations of health codes or what have you, simply based off of the COVID restrictions. And all these people are trying to do is make a living, support their community, and be in their community. And unless we start supporting these families and these groups, we're going to continue to see con- continue to see them fail and go under.
Yeah, I know the NDP like to talk a lot about corporate greed.
Mhm.
And of course, they've focused a lot on Loblaws. And I'm not sure what the shopping situation out like is in Red Deer, but I know for Calgary and Edmonton, it's pretty much the same. That Superstore offers us some of the best quality prices and some of the largest selection, over and above, what Walmart, Safeway, and I don't think you guys even have a co-op, IGA, Sobeys. So they're looking at these big places and they're calling it corporate greed. Meanwhile, box stores that have been able to remain open for generations, for decades, are closing down because I guess their corporate greed isn't enough. Now, we do have another competitor in the arena, and I know that there's a lot of people that I've talked to that don't go into shopping malls anymore, and even around Christmas time, we'll buy everything off of Amazon just because they can find more cost-effective prices as well as the free delivery. They don't even have to go in the malls at Christmas time, which for me especially, I'm gonna go with that. I don't like being in shopping malls at the best of time, but going in at
Mhm.
Christmas time and just trying to find parking is a nightmare. So, I mean, I can appreciate that, but so we can blame maybe a little bit of that on alternative means of shopping. But when we look at, they're not recognizing the exact same things as what's happening with box stores because of the higher prices, higher cost of rent, and what the carbon tax peripherally impacts. And then we see, they're going after stores that make 3.5% in net over the course of a year, while having to, maintain their own infrastructure, their own staffing. Making 3% isn't a lot of, or 3.5% isn't a lot of profit. And when you compare that to how our government runs, we're billions and billions in debt, $55 billion a year committed to just servicing the debt from Canada. These people don't know how to run a business. They don't know how to run an organization, and they have no place kind of sticking their nose into any of these things, I think.
Well, we'll start off with the Loblaws example. Part of that is the Loblaw, the people that own, the family that owns Loblaws are one of the richest families in Canada, but yet they asked the federal government for, I think it was something like $17 million to put new fridges in their stores. And the government gave them that money. We have to, the government's responsibility right now, they're spreading Canadian tax dollars right around the world. We need to take care of our own backyard. That's no different than provincially. We need our government leaders to look after our province, and we look to our federal government to look after Canada, put Canada and Canadians first, and start dealing with the issues at hand. Right now, everything seems to be more of a convenience, and admittedly, I take advantage of that as well. I'm not a big fan of going into shopping malls like yourself, but that's part of the whole social aspect of it as well, right? And it for lack of a better word, we become complacent. I can just go online and order whatever I need. And as a matter of fact, I did it the other day. I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to go out and go to the store. Went to a pharmacy. I was looking for something specific. Was talking to the people there, and they're like, oh, we don't have anything like that. And literally right there in the store, I was on Amazon looking to see if Amazon had it, and sure enough, they did. And explained to the lady, well, I'm going to get it through Amazon rather than here. And it sort of contradicts my whole point previously of we need to support the local and the mom and pop stores. It's too convenient. And I'm just as guilty of that as anybody else.
Yeah, and supporting the small businesses. I mean, it's not just the higher prices that have impacted them. I know that some of the policies inside of the city are also impacting these smaller businesses. In Calgary right now, of course, we're facing the busted water main, and there's a number of different businesses with hot works in their title. So they're working with heat. That are not allowed to be operating in Calgary right now, just because there is this shortage on water. So if a fire does start, then it's going to put a heavier tax on side of the city or on side of our water stores. So they've basically restricted that. You can't have a fire in your backyard, which is more on a personal thing. But I'd seen even years ago when they started putting in these bicycle lanes, and especially in the downtown areas. And I talked to a couple of businesses, and one in particular, the guy was actually rather successful in that he'd owned a few laundromats throughout the city, and a couple of them happened to be downtown. And his main location, as soon as they put the bicycle lanes in and canceled parking out front of his store, completely shut him down. So he went from his top location to it being losing money. And then throughout COVID, the policy restrictions throughout then, basically shut him down to a single location that he was barely able to maintain just off of that, and servicing a community that I know where it's been. And a dry cleaner has been in the area since the community started. So that was McEwen Glen that I was in. And I know I'd lived there 36 years ago when it was the end of Nose Hill. And like there was literally our backyard, an alley, and then cows on Nose Hill. The community's grown out, but like I said, since the start of that community, when we lived there was always a laundry or a dry cleaner there. And the guy had purchased the store because, again, he was doing really well in his other businesses, and then had to look at, potentially closing down his last location because it's no longer conducive for him to stay in business. And, seeing these things and what policy is actually impacting, and this is on a municipal, a provincial, and a federal level. The additional taxation from Nenshi, we've seen how many businesses that closed in the downtown core, where their property taxes went from 5 figures to 6 figures, or 4 figures to 5 figures, and it's just not conducive. What are we actually getting in return for the additional dollars spent? And Freeland just went on again yesterday to ham about her, their fair taxes when it comes to capital gains. Well, they want to screw more people out of their hard-earned dollars because they can't be responsible with the money that they're already stealing from us. I can't even believe it.
Well, I mean, Christopher Freeland said it at the very beginning of COVID, or around that time, that Canadians had all this money in their bank accounts, and because we weren't out shopping and we weren't spending our money, people were saving it, and they wanted access to that money. And so what better way to get access to that money than to continue to heavily burden tax Canadians already, and come up with other schemes that are trying to dig into the pockets of Canadians. And you sit there and you have to wonder who exactly is promoting these ideas, and why are the those that are politically elected politically, why are they following them so closely? And are they really communicating with the community and the people in their cities, or municipally or provincially, to see if the people really want these sort of things like bicycle lanes and stuff like that, because all these things cost money. And we've shown, or it's been shown repeatedly, as you said, Canada is so far in debt, it's crazy. And yet we have a government that's continuing to spend. Well, where are they going to get this money? This tax burden is going to go on for generations, and it seems like it's never going to end. So, who are the people behind the scenes that are pushing this agenda? And you have to ask yourself why.
Well, that's a good question, because we see very small sects of the population that seem to be making these decisions. And you can tell that by the number of people that you see in the actual bicycle lanes. Like, I have one that's close to my house, goes past a shopping center. And I swear to God, in the, 4 or 5 years that it's been there, I've never seen anybody with a bicycle on it. And I remember the radio stations downtown commenting about, them sitting there throughout the entire course of their shows and counting like 3 or 4 bicycles. So it's a very small section of the population that really wanted them, because there's a very small section of the population that even uses them. So, we look at bicycle lanes, and then we look at the electric buses. Well, what's driving the motivation behind electrical buses? Because they do nothing for the environment. The cost of the energy that's used to manufacture these things is not coming from renewable energy. We know that, because renewable is a farce. It's unreliable, and it's too expensive. If they did manufacture products with renewable energy, they would be twice the price, because that's what it would cost for just the energy alone. So all these renewable projects, and whether they be solar panels or the windmills or now the EVs, even for Canada to have viable EV manufacturing inside of the country, Canadians had to put up $35-40 billion for a couple of battery plants to try and get one more manufacturer to be assembling EVs inside of the country. And then we were told on the breakdown that maybe in 20 years, these investments will break even. Well, how is that an investment if you got to wait 20 years for break even? Because there's a lot that's hinging on this. And when the rest of the planet seems to be divesting from these technologies, why are we investing them into them? It'd be like, Canada, or be like Trudeau or Freeland just coming out and saying, you know what, we're reopening Blockbuster, and we've bought, what was and we've bought BlackBerry. You're dealing with obsolescent technology, with obsolescent ideas, stuff that's nobody's buying in on. The markets can provide for themselves. Sure, there is some investment required in some industries, and I totally get that. But when you look at, things like Apple, or you think companies like Dell, started from garages, even Gates, just on an operating system alone. These places started in garages, but they had such a demand for them that they were able to flourish into trillion-dollar companies by themselves. They didn't need the government input into them. And when we see, no matter how much money government throws at this green horse shit, it still doesn't come out to pasture, right? Like there's nothing growing from these things.
No, and Canada, the environment in Canada really isn't conducive to battery powered anything right now. It's too cold the winter time, and the amount of sunlight that is produced over the winter time doesn't produce enough energy to support these vehicles. And what everybody is forgetting is even these wind turbines. I drove past a wind turbine in I think it was in Manitoba. I was on my way to Ontario, and it literally had oil leaking all the way down its stand from the propeller. So we can't get away from oil and gas, and everything that we work with or deal with, from our clothes to our laptops to our phones, comes from oil and gas. And yet we're trying to destroy that industry. there's so many other options available that is renewable and could provide energy on a long-term basis that would be more conducive here in Canada. I was driving in Ontario. It was during COVID. They because I wasn't allowed to fly, and there was some flooding near the Thunder Bay area, and so it was quite interesting. I followed this semi truck behind. They had the road closed off. You could have taken a detour, but I followed this semi truck so you could drive through it. I think it was about 2 feet deep, 2.5 feet deep, not so bad. But we got through it, and it was about 100 feet long. And I thought, well, that was pretty interesting. And as I was going one direction, passing me on another direction was a Tesla. And I so badly wanted to turn around and watch this Tesla go through this flood because I knew there was no way he was going to make it. And he completely ignored the bypass, right? So there's other options on the table, but to try and get away from oil and gas totally is it doesn't make any sense, right? And one has to really look at or wonder. I know I wonder. Right now, the government is trying to destroy the oil and gas here in Alberta, but yet we look at Quebec, and Quebec's biggest natural resource is their hydroelectric. And so even when we talk about like equalization, for example, oil and gas, of course, pays Quebec a large sum of money, but yet Quebec's hydroelectric isn't included in the formula to balance out that equalization. So you have to wonder why there's such a push towards electric vehicles. Maybe I'm biased. Maybe I'm just sort of I protect Alberta and the province that I love, but it just seems too coincidental for me.
Yeah, well, I mean, Quebec seems to have gotten a lot of the sweetheart deals out of the government of Canada, and it's because they're they have their own independent party, and it's their ideas behind separation, given their population, the number of seats that they can actually hold inside of the bloc, does give them some strong bargaining tools when it comes down to it. And I think the most recent investment I'd seen was another $750 million, so $750 million. Was going to be given to Quebec to help them deal with the massive amounts of immigrants that they're going to be dealing with. So, there's another, straight up call it another $1 billion, because there's going to be interest on that money. So another $1 billion going towards non-Canadians when we see Canadians starving in the streets and living in tents and hitting the food banks in record numbers. I mean, each month, there's a new report on how many more people are hitting the food banks and how understaffed and they're running out. They can't keep up with the stress levels, and seeing these things, it's terrible.
You're absolutely right. And at some point, one would hope, and we all know that they're not going to do it, but this government needs to put a hold on the amount of immigrants coming into Canada. It's non-sustainable. Right from the food banks, as you say, to housing, we can't keep up, and people are living on the streets. And I know everybody says, we need to build back faster or build more houses and all this. But at the end of the day, there's only so many people to build those houses. Even in Alberta, for example, I think last year, one of the reports that I was reading, we were 235,000 homes short for the amount of people that needed homes here in Alberta. Well, my father was in the home building business. It takes a good period of time, 6 to 8 months, 6 months being quite short, but 8 months to build a house. But even beyond that, the housing prices right now are so high that it's pushing Canadians out of their homes. So who's buying these homes, right? So immigration is causing a big issue. I know politicians are scared to talk about it, but at the end of the day, when you have so many Canadians going to the food bank, we need to take care of Canada and Canadians first. We need to take care of our own backyard. And for whatever reason, our government leaders want to be the hero on the global stage, and they've lost sight of Canadians and what they're looking for.
Yeah, and some of the ideas are opposing ideas. So, in this, and coming back to Calgary with the water restrictions that are on right now, is Calgary City Council is set to vote on a permanent water restriction for outdoor use for Calgarians. Meanwhile, they've just approved massive blanket rezoning for the entire city. So, what it's basically saying is that our current infrastructure can't keep up with the population that we already have, but we want to tear down homes and add more houses. And, you get people saying, well, yeah, well, if there's, more densely populated, if you put a sixplex or an eightplex in the place of two properties or one property, whatever that looks like, there's no room for lawns. So those people aren't going to be watering their lawns, which I get. But I mean, we're really only watering our lawns for like 3-4 months of the year anyways. If you put, 4 to 6 families in a place of where one family is, you got 4 to 6 families that are showering, washing their laundry, doing their dishes. There's just as heavy of a load on for 12 months times, 6 or 8 families versus what you'd see from a single family living in a single lot. The ideas completely clash with each other. It doesn't make sense. My idea is if we have such large restrictions on our current infrastructure, then why don't we build out our infrastructure to the population that supported it instead of looking at adding more to an already failing system?
When you're saying that, the first thing that came to mind for me was it's sort of a contradictory in what they're saying and what we're doing in that you hear organizations like the World Economic Forum and World Health Organization, and that our population in the worldwide is exploding, and that we need to reduce the number of the population around the world in order to sustain where we're at right now with water, with food, everything else like that. And so, but yet we have people transplanting from other countries to, for example, areas like Canada and Alberta specifically, and those populations are growing, but there's nothing in place from where these people are coming from to keep that population from exploding as well, right? And so when we're talking about building, we're not talking about building more and expanding the cities. We're talking about building up, and we're seeing a lot of that high density housing, and you're exactly right. It's not going to reduce the amount of consumption. It's actually going to increase it. And yet you have to ask yourself, who's making these decisions, and why are they not being transparent with the voters, for one, and why are we not focusing on taking care of our own backyard first? And like you say, let's deal with the infrastructure issues and see where we go from there. But for whatever reason, there's an agenda, and we just don't want to acknowledge it.
Yeah, and I think that's actually right, especially on the population side of things. So you see a country that's overpopulated, let's call them third world shithole. So you see that they're overpopulated. You grab a bunch of people from there, you bring them into Canada. What's to stop them from overpopulating still? And the amount of people that we're taking in doesn't surpass the amount of population growth they're seeing there. So not only they're still seeing population growth in some of these countries, but Canada's seen 5% population increase in the last, 8 years? 5% of the population has arrived here in the last 8 years. That's not people that were born here. That's arrived here. And that's a huge, huge number.
Right. And what you're doing, what you're seeing is exactly that. You're seeing the strain on the system. You're seeing an increase in crime. You're seeing an increase in homelessness. And the more people that are coming to Canada, we're setting them up to fail, because everybody's coming to Canada for the Canadian dream, which I totally understand and I get. But even Canadians have lost, faith in that Canadian dream right now, and we're setting everybody up to fail. And at some point, you have to have leadership that says, okay, enough. We need to hold off. We need to take a step back. We need to reassess, and then move forward with a proper plan. And we don't see that happening. We just, all we see is we need more, and we need them faster, and we need to bring them in. And we're not asking the difficult questions. And because we're not asking the difficult questions, we're not, there's no challenge there for our government officials.
Yeah, and even on that, they're looking at ways of getting people through faster with citizenship or with permanent resident status. So
Yeah.
Mark Miller just introduced a bit about that last week on his caregivers idea. So they're lowering the language threshold. So people that aren't quite able to pass the current language requirements in Canada now will be able to still come in. They don't need to have any education to be considered a caregiver. And a caregiver was somebody that will look after an ill family member or a child. So kind of a nanny-ish type program. So we're going to be potentially importing people from other countries that don't speak the language to take care of the people that require the most amount of attention, which are children and the elderly, and sick people. And who are they going to communicate with if there is an issue? If a child drinks something from underneath the sink, and a caregiver doesn't know what that is, even with the WHMIS labels on it, which should be pretty apparent, who do they contact if a child consumes that? If they can't speak to a 911 operator, if they can't call into poison control, if they can't call in for non-emergencies, if they don't have the skills, the English understanding to even pass a driver's test, of what benefit is it for them to, as soon as they land in Canada, gain permanent resident status? It's a sham. It's a terrible idea.
Well, it is, and like I said, we're setting these people up to fail. But take it one step further. We have an aging population here in Canada, seniors that have contributed to their pension plan and looking forward to retirement. We're bringing seniors in from other areas that under the guise of family reunification or what have you, and I've heard, I can't confirm this, but I've heard that these seniors are being given pension dollars that they never contributed to. Now, if that is in fact the case, then you have to ask yourself why. But what we're doing as a country is we're bringing third world problems and issues to our country without any checks and balances. And we're seeing that there's an increase in crime, like I said, and an increase in homelessness. I mean, look at Toronto, for example. It blows my mind away that they're saying to people, you know what, because of car theft, leave your keys on the in the front door there, so people can, and leave your door unlocked so people can just walk into your house, take your keys, and take your car. That's absolutely ridiculous. What about I've worked for that. I've worked for my car. I've worked, blood, sweat, and tears for my home to get my home. Nowadays, people can't even afford the home, but you want me to allow people just to walk in and take my car keys? Give me a break. That's not leadership. That's just simply, accepting whatever the federal government is telling us, and without question, without any challenge, and we wonder why we're in the state we're at right now.
Well, yeah, that and the people that are the most guilty of the most amount of crimes seem to be working as our elected officials, and there doesn't seem to be any checks and balances inside of that system. I mean, right now we're dealing with treason, rampant corruption throughout our through whatever Canada's buying and building. So many scams inside of that, the ethical violations. Bordering on criminality, even looking at what Randy Boissonnault is going through, where he's a member of a 5-person company, a partner in a 5-person company. That means there's only 4 other people that work for this company. There's some question about some text, that Randy'd sent out demanding this $500,000 from the government. But yet this 5-person company, minus Randy, there's 4 other people. They can't figure out if there's another Randy that works there. And Ikra Khalid, I don't know how to say her name right, something along those lines. She said, well, it could have been a Randeep because, a lot of Randeeps will go by Randy. And it's like, okay.
Yeah.
Unless the entire company is made up of 5 people named Randy, there might be some questions as to who asked the question. But the fact that 4 other people who are supposedly not named Randy can't figure out who this other Randy actually is, that and how many people have committed treason and espionage inside of our House of Commons and Senate that we're not going to get any open or transparency on. We want the names.
Well, that's exactly right. I was chuckling there as you were saying that. When I first started in corrections, I always had inmates tell me, politicians are bigger criminals than they are. The only difference between them and the ones in jail is the ones in jail have been caught. And I laughed at that. I'm like, oh, you guys are crazy. But having been in politics now for about 5-6 years, it's uncanny how accurate they are. And there's no accountability. I mean, even, you would hope that there would be some accountability and some transparency. But the problem that we're facing right now is, and it even came from my own family. And one of my own family members was like, why would the government lie to us? And, you have to keep banging your head against that same wall, but it's like, at the end of the day, it's this exact reason. They would lie to us because it's about a transfer of money. It's about a transfer of wealth. And it's about, how I can take more from you and not be accountable. And that's the same thing with taxes. That's the same thing with this carbon tax. It's about taking more from Canadians. And is it doing anything for the environment? No, it's not. We all know that it's not. We all know that it's a scam. And yet, the government refuses to produce any of their documentation to show that this tax is benefiting Canadians and the environment. And yet, what do? They continue to collect this tax and increase it. And Canadians are just going along to get along. Sure, there's a lot of people that are upset about it, but unfortunately, at this point right now, there's not enough Canadians hurting to take a stand.
And it's going to double next year on April 1st again, isn't it?
I really don't know. I hope not. But knowing this government, anything is possible.
And what's funny is they still keep repeating this. 8 out of 10 people get more back than they give. The PBO has come out several times and said, no, this is actually not a fact. When you consider in the peripheral charges, what we're paying for increases on everything else because of this carbon tax, it's patently false. Now, there is a possibility that there are some people that are getting back more than they put in. But that is a very small population of people and really not a great reason to be giving the money back. And when you think about all the other socialist type programs that we have along those lines, like there's still a family allowance, I believe. We have the carbon rebates, and then we also have the GST kickbacks. They're just wealth distribution programs. And, the next step from this is going into UBI, Universal Basic Income, which has already been proposed. We're already giving away pharmaceuticals. We're now giving away dentistry. And what that's basically done, I mean, if we look at the healthcare system right now, in giving away free healthcare, the quality of our healthcare has diminished. If we're starting to do that with dentistry, then it's going to be the same thing. It's either that or subsidies typically don't do anything, but increase the cost of services by the exact same price as the subsidies. So, when you see a $50,000 EV that's got a $14,000 credit on it, if you buy it, and then you find an EV that doesn't have a credit on it, it still works out to be $36,000. Same price it would be. The only thing is that taxpayers, people that don't drive those cars, are now making payments on cars that other people can drive. Same thing with some of the subsidies that we see inside of the province. I think it was like up to $10,000 to put solar panels on your roof. Now, in those circumstances, in some of those circumstances, the subsidies can make these programs beneficial, only if they're subsidized. And it's only for the length of time for the existing panels. And every time you talk to somebody about solar panels and the failed solar energy projects that have happened throughout the province, they all say the same thing. Well, that's old technology. Well, so what's changed? Nothing. You don't have a panel that's going to produce 100% of its output for 100% of its lifespan. Most of these things are, their lifespan at 25 years, but the output in the last 5 years is down to such a trickle that there's no value in even keeping them up. So, having come from, the builders industry and the roofing industry, the number of issues that come along with these things doesn't make sense. You see people putting them on their houses and they're on these little platforms. And what that does is it creates a couple of different issues. One is birds love to be under there. So I know people that live next to others with the solar panels on their roof, and they find nothing but dead birds in their yard, in their gutters, and everything's covered in bird shit. The other thing that it does is it nullifies warranty on roofing products because any roofing product that gets used is used under specific installation guidelines. And as soon as you go and put on solar panels, those guidelines are out the window, which means, you've just paid $15,000, $20,000 to re-roof your home. You put your solar panels on there because the government said it was okay to do so. Your roof cooks itself off in 5 years. You go to the manufacturer, your roofing installer, and say, I'd like warranty on this. And they'd say, it's gone. Mm-hmm. You haven't abided by the correct usage of the product.
I think Canadians are being sold on false pretenses and the various programs, like you say. Nobody's talking about the disposal of these items and the environmental impact that has for Canadians. But even during COVID, for example, and what a lot of Canadians aren't realizing right now is even during COVID, they provided financial assistance for people and for businesses. And now the government's coming back and asking for that money back. So we thought that was free money, and now all of a sudden they want this money back, and Canadians don't have it. Businesses don't have it, and so we're so easily we believe what our government is telling us. And again, like I said, why would our government lie to us? Well, it's to access the money that you have in your accounts. You mentioned healthcare. Healthcare is provincial jurisdiction, and far too often we see the federal government overstepping their bounds and impeding on provincial jurisdiction, and this is causing major issues. The Constitution was there for a reason, and we need, as a province, we need as a country, leadership that's going to actually take a stand for the people. And be there and uphold the Constitution. Now I know I'm going to hear the argument, "Oh, the Constitution isn't worth the paper that it's written on." Fair enough, but again, we come back to Quebec and your comments about Quebec earlier. Quebec is the only province that didn't sign on to the Constitution, but yet it's using everything in the Constitution to its advantage. So my question is, why isn't leadership of other provinces doing the exact same thing? At that point, there would be accountability federally, and right now it's about wealth distribution, as you're well aware. You mentioned, the inheritance tax. They want to tax your inheritance. They want or capital gains as well. The capital gains tax is what they just brought out, but they're looking at the inheritance tax, and they want to take whatever money that you've managed to save up for your children once you pass away. They want to be able to tax that as well. And so again, this is about taking what you have, and it really, when you look at the bigger picture, it really becomes evident, and you probably heard it time and time again, you will own nothing and you'll be happy. And I don't know about you, but I'm not working for everybody else to be happy and me owning nothing. That's just not how, for me, that's not how it works out. So the question then becomes, what do you need to do to wake more Canadians up to recognize, or get Canadians, not even just wake them up, but get Canadians engaged in what's happening to them politically?
And yeah, I'm working with a couple of different groups, and the problem with it is, and these are all inside of the province of Alberta. The problem with it is, and I think at last count, there's like 185 or 187 of these small groups that crop up, and for the most part, they are conservative based. But at the same time, there needs to be that many, because we either can't get along with the same ideas or the same wording of the same ideas, and or everybody wants to be a leader of their own group, and nobody wants to relinquish those reins. And the problem with that is we see some stuff coming out of the UCP, and conservatives, and I don't know why we're so fucking terrible at this. If the premier or one of the members of legislative assembly, even one of the city councilors, if they make the one decision that they don't agree with, conservatives will fly off the handle and swear that they'll never vote, and they'll just continue to shit talk that exact same politician. We're not going to agree with everything that comes out of the province, no. and certainly Smith's had a couple of ideas, or that her government's introduced a couple of ideas that aren't popular with other people. And even on the conservative side of things that I talk to, I keep hearing the same things. Why is she working to appease people that will never vote for her? And that's a good question. And I think a big part of that problem is because there are so many of these small conservative groups, and especially because we are fairly strong as Albertans in a grassroots type setups, is we'll pop up another small conservative party inside of the province to run against the UCP. I mean, isn't that what we just finished watching play out? And that's literally how Smith is now the head of the UCP, and we'll open up another party instead of trying to get along. We need to get 187 groups, and we need to get 100 leaders of 187 groups under one tent, and say, okay, let's have these discussions. What do we want to see as Albertans? And then let's create this template for how citizens need to communicate and engage with their province, with their cities and townships.
Yeah, we're not always going to like what everybody has to say, but what's the consensus amongst these groups? And then let's come to an agreement and move forward from there, and let's unify and come together. I would challenge anybody to give me any other liberal group, like the conservatives are we're so fractured. Give me any liberal group that does this. I mean, you just don't see it. And if it does happen, it's behind closed doors, right? They're not starting up other groups and my idea is better than your idea, and we're going to move forward. Preston Manning said it best, and this is probably the biggest challenge that conservatives have, is that unless, and I'm going to paraphrase here, but unless conservatives decide to get involved in some way, shape, or form, whether that's voting, whether that's being part of the student council, whether that's running as a counselor in your city or your town, or even helping out on a campaign, we're going to be controlled by those who do decide to get involved, and we're not going to like the result. And that's exactly where we're at. So while conservatives are splitting hairs right now, well, my idea is better than your idea, I'm sitting there going, you know what? We're talking about the same thing. We're just not agreeing on the final objective. How do we come together as conservatives and say, okay, this is where we need to be, and we need to move forward. I understand what Premier Smith is doing. She's trying to get that consensus, and we're not always going to like everything that she decides. But if you don't like what a politician is doing, then you need to be able to hold them accountable. I do believe in the recall. You guys were experiencing that in Calgary. I think your MLAs do need to be accountable, but they also need to be accessible to be accountable, and they need to be transparent. And if they're not, then you have that right to vote them out. And until we start getting involved and wanting to change it, we need to stop complaining. I think right now there's, if I understand it correctly, there's about a 40% of the population right now doesn't even vote. Well, if you're not voting and you're not getting your voice heard through voting or participating in some way, shape, or form, then stop complaining, because I don't want to hear it. If you get engaged some way, help out. The grassroots people in Alberta have shown that when they take a stand, and they're strong, and that can happen anywhere across this country. And I really believe that right now across this country, each province is looking for that one leader provincially to take a stand against Ottawa so they can get behind and do the same thing. And I think Alberta is the tip of the spear on that. We just need to get behind the leadership and ensure, hold them accountable, and make sure that we move forward, especially as a province.
Yeah, and then one of the things I was saying is it comes down to the number of different groups out there and the number of different voices that everybody's trying to hear. Whereas and there's also an affordability factor, and then there's a time factor. So I know some groups will meet once per week, and whether it's by Zoom or local town halls, whatever. There's a cost factor and there's a time factor that's involved in that, and not a lot of families have that much disposable time or disposable income that they can be, giving monthly donations. Because it's not just, the Conservatives and the NDP, the parties themselves that are constantly looking for more dollars to come from their voters for support. But each one of these little groups, they require the same funding as well. So, if you're a parent, and I remember when my kids were home and they were growing up, there was school, there was concerts, there was soccer, there was extracurricular activities, there was the friends coming over, and the odd night when the kids would go out to a sleepover, that'd be like the one night that we wouldn't do anything. We just go to bed because we'd get our rest in, right? But what people are going through right now is a much more big situation, because I know people that are, they'll have a full-time job and will still be driving for Uber in the evening, or Skip the Dishes, or one of these other gig type opportunities, whether it's blowing snow or shoveling sidewalks or mowing lawns. And that's just to keep, in line with a lifestyle that they'd created for themselves 5 years ago, when they could actually afford to live in the house that they're in. When you take people that no longer have disposable income and disposable time, who couldn't commit 15 minutes a week to having a discussion or even reading about something that's going on in their local political scene, and you introduce that into what we're seeing now, people have less time, they have less money. And what we're doing is, I believe it's even less patience. People don't want to think about this because they're already under so much of a stress load that they can't deal with anything else that's hitting their plate.
I think that's by design. That's by design. We have groups and organizations that are overloading parents and others in society, and whether that's something happening at the school, or something happening politically, or something happening on the world stage, we're overloaded. And the people, when they get overloaded, tend to just shut down. And I think that's what we're seeing. And I believe that's by design, because when people shut down, they don't get engaged, they don't get involved. And we're seeing that even at the polling stations, when it comes to time to vote, people just aren't showing up, yet they're not happy with what's going on. And the only way for their voices to be heard is to take the time and vote. So the bigger question is, how do we change that? How do we engage those people that are so overwhelmed, and provide them with enough information to make an informed decision? And that's where folks like podcasts, because people spend a lot of time right now on social media. The younger generation, they're always on their phones or always on their iPads, and as we discussed yesterday about mainstream media, they're not going to cover these issues. But how do we get that information to them? And it's platforms like yourself that are going to get this information to them. They just have to be willing to take that information, have that talk with their neighbors, have that talk with their friends, have that talk with their family, and get involved. And you know what? Like I said, it only takes a few minutes just to vote, to make your voice heard. but at least that's still something.
Well, and that's it. And I think the same thing is, people that say, I don't vote because I haven't really paid attention to who they are. And there's other people that say I'm going voting, but it's under pure partisan. It's, they're very tribalistic in nature. So they go out and it doesn't matter, what the name is. If it's beside NDP, they'll just blanket vote NDP. If it's conservative, they'll blank conservative, but still without an understanding of the ideas that go behind these things. So even when you try and get behind some of these ideas, the political speak that goes around them, and we talked a little bit about this last night, is very confusing. So the example that I like to use is, and we hear in the NDP leadership throughout the province of Alberta going through this right now, is they talk about toxic drugs hitting the streets. So they want to see an end of the toxic drugs. Well, that doesn't mean that they're actually going to be taking drugs off the street. What it means is that they want to adopt a program like BC has, where they introduce safe supply. Now, when they introduce safe supply in BC, there's of course more deaths. The people that are getting these safe supply drugs, they're not actually taking them. They're selling them to drug dealers so that they can buy their substance of choice. Now, it's something like 27% of kids in school from grade 9 to 12 in BC are on one of these legalized safe consumption drugs. So we've created another generation of addicts at the same time as making the streets less safe for the people that have to pay for it, to give less toxic supplies to people that are addicted to substances that are illegal to begin with. So, I mean, when people see the NDP platform, they hear all the rhetoric that goes behind, well, we just have to make supply more safe and then less people will die. Some people can get on board with it, but anybody that's lived through addiction or that has a family member or a neighbor or friends that have gone through an addiction cycle knows that you do not cure an alcoholic of alcoholism by taking them to the bar. You don't help somebody who's obese by continuously delivering them McDonald's so that they don't have to get up, move, and cook for themselves. These aren't cures to problems. And why we think that this would work any different with drugs is obscene.
Well, let's start from the first points that you were making there, about the NDP and the voting and stuff like that. I'm going to ask you a question. Who's the most powerful person right now in Ottawa?
Jagmeet Singh.
Exactly. And Jagmeet Singh actually holds the balance of power in Ottawa with 25 seats. So he's the most powerful person in Ottawa. Did you know that 19 of those 25 seats are in Western Canada? So really, right now, Western Canada holds the balance of power. And if Western Canada wanted to make a difference in Ottawa, the balance of power is available to them. Because right now, so many people believe that the election is over by the time it hits the Ontario-Manitoba border. And that's actually not true. In my position is this. The people in Ottawa, especially the Trudeau and the Liberals, should be, the fear of God should be put on them and going, okay, the elections hit the Ontario-Manitoba border. Good God, who's going to hold the balance of power now? And it should be, the grassroots people that are making this decision. And we talked about it last night, independence or what have you. But somebody that's going to hold the balance of power, that's going to hold Ottawa accountable. The drugs, we're missing the issue when it comes to drugs in the safe consumption, because the simple fact is the federal government is the worst drug dealer in the world. They're the only drug dealer in the world that's giving their product away for free. And actually, it's not for free because us as taxpayers are paying for it. And we're not addressing the underlying issues related to addiction and crime. We're not dealing with the mental health issues and related to addiction and crime. And, all we're doing with these safe consumption sites, as you said, is we're increasing the number of addicts. We're creating a new generation of addicts. But what we're doing is by providing these drugs for addicts at these sites, is it's actually increasing the amount that they can get and increasing their consumption. So now they're looking for more and harder, and they're chasing that dragon, as I call it. And one of the biggest threats that we have right now on the streets is fentanyl. And how do we address that? The fentanyl, something the size of a grain of salt, will kill you. And we're not addressing that. And when you talk to the subject matter experts about how to address this issue, and I'm talking about the police forces, the drug enforcement agencies for Canada, they will tell you what needs to happen, but that's falling on deaf ears. And you have to ask yourself why. So too many questions. I mean, we need to start addressing mental health and addiction. We have to. It's one and the same. And how do we help these people get off of their addiction and live the life that they deserve to live and want to live? And until that, it all ties together, with bringing down the Canadian society as a whole, and increased immigration. Not that it's a direct contributor to increased addiction, but we're seeing people that are losing their homes, losing their families, and what are they doing? They're turning to addiction. They're turning to drugs to deal with the pain that they're going through and the suffering that they're going through. So we have to start taking that seriously. And until we do, we're going to see an increase in not only narcotic death, but we're going to see an increase in addiction and both through drug addiction and alcohol addiction.
And I agree with that too. I mean, what we'd seen throughout COVID is they'd close down gyms. Meanwhile, they would leave fast food, pot stores and liquor stores open throughout the pandemic. And I've seen people say, well, because people are addicted to these substances, so they have to. Well, do we treat all addiction the same? Are we going to start giving gamblers, some side pocket cash so they can go and hit the VLTs on the way home to help them cure themselves, right? The idea is stupid, but that's just, to really highlight, pontificate how how crazy it is for us to be giving away free drugs. It's akin to giving gamblers free cash.
You're absolutely right. It blows the mind away, doesn't it? And what's even more interesting, and you can look at every province. Number of years ago, talking to a number of psych nurses in the community and psych doctors that I know in the community, and I believe this was during the Ralph Klein era here in Alberta. They closed over 200 beds for mental health and addiction here in Alberta. Now they're scrambling to reopen these beds to deal with the addiction and the problems that we're having as a society now, rather than looking at the problem and dealing with it. So we're chasing things, and we're enabling addicts rather than providing them with more help and really starting to understand or address the underlying issues. And I think that all of this is part and parcel in trying to destroy the family, the core family values.
Yeah, and it's actually funny because if you sit and you think about inside the province, we have a lot of Hutterite colonies, which are basically the essential of the pioneer family communities. That they maintain basically everything that they have on side of their lands. They do their own buildings and stuff. They have entered into some of our economy in selling and having to purchase goods. So they do, maintain themselves, but you don't hear about a lot of drug addiction issues inside of the Hutterite colonies. And you don't hear a lot about alcoholism and, even as far as goes, I'm not sure that they had any COVID deaths inside of there. And, everybody said it's because they weren't watching TV. They were never really impacted by the lockdown measures, by the vaccine mandates, because their lives aren't involved in a community that pays much attention to it. Now, conversely, when cellular and internet started to become a much bigger thing, is that I'd seen that, some colonies had some members that had some phones that found porn on their devices, and racked up thousands of dollars. So the heads of the households or the heads of the communities would get these bills and just go like, what is this all about? And then they'd eventually claw it back. And now, some of the IT that works for them basically maintains their network so that they're only allowed to approve or, visit sites that are approved by content by age. So they've completely removed the problem. They didn't give them more devices and more access to porn to cure their people of porn. They took it away. So when they noticed that there was a problem, they removed the problem instead of feeding the addiction.
Right.
It seems to make sense.
It does. And, interesting, in 2021, during the election in 2021, we saw an increase in these church organizations that normally don't vote. It's against their religion to vote, getting involved and actually voting because of the restrictions that were being placed on not only Canadians, but their communities. And they felt that this was the only way that they could address the challenges that they were faced with regards to COVID and the vaccinations. So they took a stand then, and because it was affecting their personal lives. Now, from what I understand or what I believe, they've gone back to, they're not getting involved in the voting or the government, which I understand that's part of their beliefs. But they felt it was important enough to get involved and take a stand. And now we just need Canadians to everyday Canadians to do the exact same thing, get involved, take a stand, and be part of the solution. And you're absolutely right. They didn't give them more laptops. They didn't give them more iPads. They addressed the problem. They moved forward because that's what they believed in. And that's what we need to do with addicts, with mental health and addiction, is we need to address the underlying issues and move forward as a society. We need to help each other and, get back to family and community and caring for one another, and just talking, just having a talk, as simple as that. I had a veteran reach out to me the other day for no other reason, just to have a talk and just to, tell me what he was going through. And it's interesting how important just an ear listening to somebody will change their day. I found that in the prison system. One of the things that I did in corrections was I was a crisis negotiator. And a big part of that was showing people, they were going through a crisis for whatever reason, that, they are a survivor. And what did they need to do to get through this crisis and help them through it, walk them through it, and just be there to listen and quite honestly, not judge, but just understand. And far too often these days, we're more focused on judging somebody than we are actually listening to what they have to say. We don't always have to agree with it. But it's nice to be able to just listen and have somebody to talk to.
And I find that social media has even created a bit of a situation with that. And, though I'm actually fairly fond of Twitter, and this is being broadcast on Twitter, irony of all ironies is that I believe that social media platforms like TikTok or Instagram or even Facebook, Twitter, is they've shortened people's attention spans. So, I maintain two communities, call it a third community inside of the video portion of these things. The videos are a little bit longer, so people have to be a little bit more, they have to have a little bit more time to kind of engage in these. The biggest portion of, my active is on shortened posts. So something that's 2 to 3 sentences long, if that's all that people can commit to. And it comes the same way. They get patternized to reading 2 to 3 clips, and they don't see what's going on inside of legacy media. They can't take on the same amount of information that's inside of a book or inside of a long written article. When it comes down to engagements on actual articles, I have a community on Substack that that focuses more, that's more appreciative of the written word, because that's why they'd signed up. And by the written word, I don't mean in the biblical philosophical, just in what I choose by way of content. So I think it's a big portion of just shortened attention spans is what people have, is why they can't go into the long conversations. And I'm going to say in some certain circumstances, I'm the same. We lose patience with people. And, for me, I've got terrible hearing. As time goes on, my hearing gets worse. I've got tinnitus in my left ear. So when it comes to having a conversation, if somebody's speaking too low, or if they have too much of an accent, or if it's a bit of a struggle for me to listen to, I'm the same way. I can't do it. I get too frustrated too fast, and I'll walk away from conversations before I can fully hear somebody out. And it's just the conditioning that we've gone through having something internet fast, Walmart cheap, and that comes with Costco's return policy. That's our life, what they are right now, right?
Yeah.
Longevity of products that we have inside of our homes. There's nothing that gets fixed anymore, is it? Yeah, your vehicle maybe. But I mean, if you break an appliance inside of your home, the likelihood is you're going to be hucking that piece of shit out instead of fixing it, because fixing it's going to cost pretty much the same as buying new. And that's, we'd seen that start happening with like VCRs, but now it's like gaming systems, it's computers, it's monitors, it's printers, it's your washer, your dryer, your fridge, your stove, your microwave, your home entertainment, everything that you have. And, like even in a barbecue, because I barbecue year round. So I've had, in my lifetime, I'm going to say 9 barbecues. And I'm on my last, my latest one right now. It's Napoleon. I think so. What is it? I don't know. Something. Yeah, I think it's Napoleon. And in every barbecue that I've ever had up to this point, I've never had the regulator go on me. I've had this one for a year and a half. And Napoleon's an overpriced brand to begin with. But it was on sale at Costco. It has a name. And I figured it'd be an okay barbecue. Should be good for longevity. But yeah, so I think it's maybe a year and a half, 2 years old, and I've already gone through a regulator. I have never, the chassis have fallen out. My barbecues have fallen apart from rust and being overheated. The point, I don't want to fix them. I don't want to clean them. I just want to get rid of them and get a new one in. And this thing inside of 2 years has lost a regulator that I have not lost in 30 years of owning a barbecue. And it's like, how is quality on everything slid so far that we're just more accepting of replacement, and no tolerance for fixing, for looking at these things by ourselves.
Yeah. You know what? It's interesting. I'm probably just as guilty as you are. For myself, I wasn't on social media up until I got involved in politics. I didn't have Twitter. I didn't have Facebook. I didn't have anything. And when you're trying to represent people, obviously you've got to have these tools. And the other day I was at a restaurant, and I'm sitting there on my phone, so I'm just as guilty, but I look up and I see a family across the way from me, and they're not talking. They're all on their phone. Well, they might be talking with one another, texting each other, for all I know, who knows, but they're not communicating and talking. And we've lost that ability to communicate. But even going to your barbecue, for me, I prefer not to barbecue. I barbecue, but I do it on open pit fire. That's the way I prefer to cook. But my question is, let's say everything goes to heck or goes to hell here in Canada. How are people going to survive? I know for myself, I can jump out into the bush. I'm good to go. As a matter of fact, that's one of my favorite things to do. I like to go out into the bush and just get lost. And I know I can survive because I learned these skills in the military. And I know, through my life experiences, how to hunt and how to skin, all these things. And I can survive. And, it's funny, but my son, when he was younger, we took him to a petting farm, and he literally grabbed an egg that was just laid by a chicken, and he went to put it in his mouth. And it's like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? So it's that lack of knowledge. We're not passing on this knowledge and moving things forward. And how are people going to survive if, if we did lose everything, if we lost the internet? For me personally, I would love for that to happen. Get back to the old ways, reading a book and actually talking to one another. But how would people survive? And those challenges, it's interesting to see. And but again, we're at where we're at, and convenience is much simpler than actually learning how to just be, right, and live. So it's interesting that you say that, but I think I've still had the same barbecue now for 10 years. So I think I've got lucky.
Yeah, I had a Vermont Castings that lasted me about 15 years, and even saying goodbye to that, and it was this large, majestic 6-burner. It was beautiful, but I mean, it just got to the point where everything had basically burnt out. And again, we barbecue religiously year round. We don't typically cook meat inside of the house unless it's a sauce or a roast, and even then, it'll hit the barbecue first. To get browned up, and then may see the inside of a pressure cooker for quicker. And they got turkey 2-3 times a year, but 100% of the meat that we basically cook is outside on the grill. So me going through one of these things every few years instead of having to go through and try and replace burners and whatever, I'm okay with. I get it. I can save a couple of bucks if I fixed them. Whatever. I did the same thing with a pressure washer. I bought 2 years ago, blew the seals on it. The first time I brought it out this year. Can I take it apart? Can I replace the seals? Absolutely can. Thing cost me $100. Happened to be at Costco. There was one on sale for like $110. By the time I was going to go through and finish farting around with this plastic piece of shit that I wasn't really happy with to begin with, the $110 reinvested into another one seemed to be a better idea.
But getting back to talking about the social talking and social media and stuff like that, what would happen to society if internet just sort of disappeared? What would happen to this younger generation? I've read reports where up to 65% of the younger generation would commit suicide as soon as the internet was gone, because they don't know how to communicate. They don't know how to socialize. They don't know how to, that's their life. That's their livelihood. That's how they communicate with their friends. So as a society, we're being driven to be dependent on these devices. For me, that's not necessarily a good thing, but again, everything has its purpose.
No, I agree with what you're saying. And they say we're one solar flare away from losing everything by way of communications. Mm-hmm. Just because everything's gotten to, somewhat wireless, we're not hardlined as much. I mean, we're hardlined in with our, a lot of the internet services, and, maybe some of the wireless radios and stuff could be rehashed rather rapidly, but I don't know what that looks like. Is that a month? Is that 2 months? Is 3 months, 5 months? And yeah, if people have lost the ability to communicate or to be tethered to a phone that's plugged into a wall, then yeah, we're looking at a lot screwed should something like that happen. A big EMF, a big, a solar flare that wipes out communications. We'd be proper.
Well, you're right. And the thing is, we're finding that because this usage is expanding, we're seeing government now impeding on your rights of free speech and impeding on your ability to communicate online. I know from experience, I've had a lot of what I call keyboard warriors, or window warriors, as they would say in the prison, that you're going to say a lot behind the screen, but it's not something that you would actually say to somebody's face. And I understand to a degree what's being said, but I don't agree with how it's being done. And the simple fact of the matter is if I don't like what you're saying, then I don't have to listen to you. I don't have to, acknowledge it. And as you said last night in our discussion after the show, I can simply block you. and move on. So I mean, everything has got its purpose. What I'm finding concerning right now is the amount of government overreach federally that's coming down on Canadian citizens. And what I'm really concerned about is the federal government overreach into provincial jurisdiction. You mentioned it earlier about healthcare. Healthcare is provincial jurisdiction, but yet you have a federal government, imposing their rules on the provinces, and we need our provincial leaders to take a stand.
Well, and it's, when you look at the social media platforms and like Twitter, I mean, like you are under your own name on Twitter. I'm under my own name. I'm under Yakstack, but it's got my name associated with it. Anybody that's seen me basically knows who I am, and then it's got a link to my Substack from there, and from there you can find my YouTube channel. I don't hide by any stretch of the imagination, but it seems to me a lot of the people that are I'm going to say the most egregious assholes that are on the internet are cloaked under anonymity. They don't use their own picture. A lot of them don't even have a name or anything that might even be misconstrued as a name. And I get, that some people are a part of organizations, or some people have had to do that to protect their identity, and especially through the COVID sham. But all the people that are under anonymity, when these restrictions do come under by government, if they come into play, where they're looking at censoring your content, or potentially kicking you off the internet, or putting you in prison for life for hate crimes because of something you said on the internet. And this is a retroactive law, meaning if you called somebody a peckerhead or whatever that looks like, whatever they consider hate speech, and that's the thing, then the only guys that are going to be potentially censored are guys like you and me. The only guys that are going to face any jail time or fines or sanctions are going to be guys like you and me that hang out with our real names, because we're not afraid to have the conversations. So I think it's us that they're the most afraid of. It's not the internet anonymity.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it comes down to whose interpretation of that hate speech or whatever being said, who's the one that's going to determine that is in fact hate speech. It comes down to, I'm sorry, I hurt your one feeling. Let me apologize, and because I don't want to offend you. As far as I'm concerned, the more honest people are with one another, then if I tell you, you need to pull your head out of your ass, then it's not considered hate speech. It's just me being honest. You don't have to like it. You can ignore it. You can turn it off. Really don't care. You're not going to say anything to offend me, because at the end of the day, as long as I'm true to my values and true to what I believe in, and I'm open and honest and transparent, I don't care. And, you're not going to offend me. It's okay for us to not agree on things. We have to understand we're not going to always agree. And, you're not going to hurt my one feeling because of that.
Yeah. And then cancel culture kicks in too, right? The whole other side of things, when, people band against you, or band against products. And I both sides are guilty of it. Both the left and the right are, the Bud Light thing with Mulvaney, and, the lefties with Loblaws and whatever.
You know what? The cancer right now, as a society, I find it interesting, because as a society, we're allowing 1% of the population to control the other 99% or 97%, whatever you want to say. And, with all of these rights, and I need to be heard, and all these, and at the end of the day, people are saying, I don't care, just stay away from my kids. I find it interesting, though, because, and I've said this before, and I've got no problem saying it again now. We're bringing in, Canada's bringing in a lot of the Muslim culture and their beliefs. And if I'm wrong, I truly apologize. It's not meant to be discouraging or insulting anybody or anybody's religious beliefs. But my understanding is that Muslims, when it comes to people like LGBTQ, and that their religion is so against that they actually kill LGBTQ. Yet we're bringing more of this in. You know what I mean? At some point down the road, we're going to end up in a conflict here, and yet why? You have to ask yourself why, right? It comes down to so many different things, and if you want to live your life a certain way, then that's your choice. I don't have to agree with it. Chances are I won't agree with it, but that's not for me to decide. That's your life. If you want to live your life as a cat, well, then fine, live your life as a cat. I mean, interestingly enough, we had an inmate who at one point decided that they wanted to live as a cat, and then they had a litter box in their cell and everything else like that. And of course, management came to the officers and said, you know what, you got to clean the litter box. And the officers were like hell, we're going to leave that to the inmates. Well, guess what? That person didn't identify as a cat for very much longer. Right. So, it's about taking a stand, and there's so many interesting other parallels that we could draw to that. And it comes down to a society. Why are we trying to, or why is government trying to destroy our society and the things that we believe in? They're trying to destroy religion. They're trying to destroy the family core. They're trying to bring down all these things. And you have to ask yourself why. Like, it's for me, it's mind boggling.
And that's what I can't get either. I find myself every once in a while just walking around pondering, what would Canada be like if we did still have a focus on the environment, keeping our streets clean, keeping our provincial parks clean, keeping our roads, our infrastructure upkept, but got away from the lunacy, the wokeism. We'd be a rich country. We wouldn't have to be paying more taxes. We wouldn't be looking at generational debt. We wouldn't be looking at creating or taking everybody else's, the world's problems, and either importing them into Canada or accepting them or exporting our problems outward. And by that, I mean, looking at the climate change scam that we're going through. Canadians are on the hook for $5 billion, where Trudeau's given the money to tropical islands to help them fix their weather. Like, what are these people doing with that money? They're going to do absolutely nothing but blow it. It's just, more slush fund that these guys are giving out. $5.5 billion that Canadians have to pay for, taxpayer money, that's going to tropical countries. Whereas people are deciding between paying their rent, their mortgages, and heating their home in the wintertime, and we're giving money to the tropics. It's, again, lunacy.
Well, I'll tell you a story, and this is sort of how I equate that analogy. So when I was running in 2019, I had a gentleman who was I was very close to, and he worked on my campaign, and we were talking about that. And back in the day, Canada would send cargo ship loads of grain to Kenya, as an example, or Somalia, just as an example. One of those, and what would happen is, prior to coming into port, the captains of the boat would dump half of that load of grain into the ocean. And I'm like, well, that's kind of odd. And then the boat would come in, the warlords would come in, take half of whatever's left. So there's only a quarter of that left. And then that quarter would be given out to the people. I'm like, well, why would you do that? And the answer was it's actually quite fitting right now for Canada and Canadians. When your people are wondering where their next meal is coming from, or how they're going to feed their families, they're less likely to stand up against their government. And that's exactly where we're at right now, right? We're being put into a position as to why would you stand up against your government when you're more worried about how you're going to feed your family, whether you're going to have a roof over your head, all of these other issues. And I never ever thought that Canada would be in that position. And as veterans, like I was explaining to you last night, we just celebrated the 80th anniversary of D-Day, and we've completely forgot why we're celebrating that. what that put an end to, and we're seeing that come to Canada now, and we need to figure out how to deal with that.
Absolutely. Now, we got about a half an hour left here on the call. So I want to get a little bit more specific into the event that's going on over the weekend, and that's the Veterans for Freedom, and it's going to be Canadians for Truth. So Theo Fleury and Joseph from Canadians for Truth, and I believe Andrew's coming out from Veterans for Freedom. You're going to be one of the speakers that's there. How did you get involved with the Veterans for Freedom aside from being a vet? Like, you heard about them, you just thought you'd join this, or were you specifically invited because you're somewhat political inside of the Red Deer area?
Well, you know what? I think my name is quite well known here in the Red Deer area in Central Alberta. I've been in a number of elections, attended a number of events. But when I got involved with Veterans for Freedom, I'm sure you're familiar with James Top.
Yep.
So James Top, for those people that don't know, most people do know, James walked across Canada to Ottawa. I met James in Lethbridge. I needed to talk. James is a Patricia, just like myself, ex-airborne, just like myself. And I wanted to go talk to him. And I talked to him, and we created a great friendship. And so just as James was getting closer to Ottawa, I decided that I was going to go and join James marching into Ottawa. So I joined James for about 125 kilometers, and a lot of the group that we were walking with were Veterans for Freedom. And you know what? I believe in the organization, what they're trying to do. Veterans have sacrificed so much for Canada and Canadians, right through from World War I all the way through. And for me, I felt like it was important to belong to an organization like this in order to continue to remember, not just through D-Day, but through all through the year, where veterans can remind Canadians that this is a sacrifice that we made for all of us. And it's exciting to be a part of that. It's exciting to be a part of this event on the 15th here in Red Deer. And I look forward to meeting fellow veterans and having this discussion, having this talk.
Oh, that's awesome. And with your time in Red Deer, I know we talked about this, but you were running for, I think it was for a federal seat, correct?
That's right.
Or was it provincial?
That's right.
Okay. And that was under the PPC, so under Mad Max Bernier. And now you are more so working towards a seat for Central Alberta with the UCP board. Can you talk a little bit about what's opened up your eyes inside of the province specific to making a transition from the PPC and then back to the UCP versus the federal Conservatives, or staying with PPC?
Well, you know what? I firmly believe that we talked about this earlier. There's so many factions out there and divide within the Conservatives that I had to take a look and recognize. I got to make a difference here. I really believe that what we're doing as a province moving forward is going to be, as I said earlier, the tip of the spear for other provinces to basically ride the coattails of Alberta and take a stand against Ottawa. And the best way that I knew how to do that was to join with the UCP. I agree with the policies that they're bringing forward, and in a more autonomous Alberta with Ottawa. And what better way to help contribute and push our province forward?
Yeah, exactly. And on the same lines, I know the AGM for the UCP is coming up in November, first week of November in Red Deer as well. And I'm sure you you probably have a lot of the, I'm guessing it's the local Veterans for Freedom, because I know Veterans for Freedom is a lot bigger out east than it is out west so far.
It is.
And I think that might be, primarily due to where it basically started, where Ottawa is, as well as the number of people from the eastern provinces that are veterans or ex-military, right? So I know that there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be heading down to the AGM, and not a lot of people that are going to be as aware of it right now. But inside of that, I mean, like, it's one day that people can go out and see what's going on inside of their communities. Beneficial to be inside of part of one of these things than to be on the outside looking in, isn't it?
Well, you know what? What it does is it provides an opportunity for people to come and ask questions. I love to be able to sit back and be open and have discussions with people one on one, because far too often at events such as this, you don't get to ask the questions. You don't get that one on one time. And this provides that opportunity to come and ask questions, either of veterans, fellow veterans, and their experiences and what they went through, or even for myself in the political aspect and what my thoughts are on this, or how do I feel about that, and really getting involved and getting informed. It's important for not only grassroots Albertans and grassroots Canadians to get informed and understand what those who are looking to represent you stand for, but what are they willing to not stand for? At what point is their cutoff point to say, you know what, I'm going to hold people accountable. That's it, and be done with. And I think that's important for people to educate themselves and really learn. And this event is going to allow you to do that.
And I think it's also a big portion is, again, you know, we come across a lot of conservatives that say, oh, you know, they made this one decision and I'll never stand behind them or I'll never vote for them again. So people are typically louder on their comments with stuff that they don't agree with. So, you know, the 2, 3, let's call it 10 things that Smith may have done that may have ticked some people off, or that they don't get a full understanding or can't really grasp, versus the other things that are going on that are positive. We don't see the impact of all change, and you know, it's I encourage people to be involved in a level that that's not going to take away from their families or their affordability, you know, in being a part of their political groups, but to take some time and get to know the topics. And you don't have to be a part of every battle. Choose the ones that are the most specific to you, like, you know, parents and what's going on inside of the schools, or you know, there's a lot of issues that are out there. Pick the ones that are specific to you. Focus on those. And if you're getting the answers that that you need to see, then that's great. And if you're not, then those are the ones that you're gonna, you know, press the provincial or your municipal, even the federal governments on. We want answers.
Well, don't be
we want
afraid
accountability.
That's right. Don't be afraid to challenge. Right. People. And this is my position. I mean, some people probably in the political field wouldn't agree with me, but if I'm putting my name forward to represent the people of the community, then I need to be accessible. I need to be open and transparent and as honest as I can with everybody, but also, like I said, be accountable for the decisions that I make. I'm not always going to be right. And people aren't always going to agree with me, but at the end of the day, if I can give you an answer, or at least answer your question and give you the respect that you deserve as somebody in the community, somebody that I'm representing, or even if I'm not representing your community, if you're from another province or whatever, you know, it's about being there. You're putting your name forward to be in public office, and that's exactly what it is. So you can't hide behind the computer screen. You can't hide behind the tablet or whatever. Be there for the people, and you know, work with everybody as best as you can, and find that consensus and move forward. As a province, we need to take a stand and stand together with our premier. Right, you know, she may not make all the perfect decisions in your mind. She may be, but at the end of the day, you know, you're going to have that opportunity to voice your opinion at the next election. And let's just keep moving forward and take a stand against Ottawa.
Yeah, so I mean, we can address the UCP inside of an internal polling and leadership votes. You know, if Smith no longer seems to be the representative for the population, just like Kenny, we'll take these up through the AGMs and vote them out. We'll find somebody that can represent Canadians better. And I think a bigger part of it for a lot of people to understand is that a lot of these people aren't career politicians. So, you know, some may have taken poli-sci in school. Some may have taken some civics courses. But when it comes down to it, I think there's a lot of confusion that goes on inside of the government, and it's not just with the people, but it's with the people that we put in these positions. Ultimately
Agreed.
speaking, they are still people.
Hmm.
And if they don't know something, they just don't know. I mean, there is a certain amount of patience that we have to exercise because they're just people too. So
Yeah.
when you start off in a new position, and this isn't for the lifers or the career politicians that are out there, but some of the first termers, they get out there. It's their first term in an elected office. They're not necessarily going to know how to navigate through every set of questions, and they may not even have the staffing available to them to be able to get to those immediately. And when they're dealing with, and I'll attest to this, like I am in the grand scheme of nobodies, I'm like right up there as a top fucking nobody. But at the same time, I can't keep up to my own email lists and meet anybody that's part of Yakstack or my Twitter groups, and they'll tell you the same thing, that I'm absolutely terrible with it.
Hmm.
And I don't have a staff. Obviously, I'm the lone man, and I'm writing articles on Twitter, writing articles on Substack, doing the podcasts, doing some video broadcasts, doing some video editing. So when it comes down to, I'm trying to build a community, but at the same time, I don't have the number of man hours that I need to maintain that community. So when somebody walks into a new job as an elected official, there is a certain amount of patience that we do have to exercise. We can't be like, you didn't get back to me in a week, I'm going to vote you out.
Well, we have to understand that we're so used to, as a society, for that immediate gratification. And that's because of the internet and social media, et cetera, that, we put something out there, we expect an answer right now. So we need to have understanding. People are going to make mistakes. That's the reality. We have to have compassion for the fact that, in all likelihood, they're very much initially overwhelmed. But as long as these people who are elected are open and honest, and at least take the time to acknowledge the fact that these people have reached out, I think people would be more understanding at that point. It's not an excuse to say, I'm new to the job and I don't have time. As far as I'm concerned, that's not an excuse. You're the one to put your name forward, and whether it's a week or 2 weeks down the road, at least take the time to acknowledge an email or a phone call or what have you, because in the same sense, people just want to be acknowledged on the fact that they've reached out.
No, absolutely right. And on side of this, how important do you think the rural communities are in maintaining conservative party inside of the province of Alberta?
They're absolutely vital. Their voices need to be heard loud. They need to be continually involved. We saw this actually recently in the Sundre Rocky Mountain House Association for the UCP. Just reading the comments, because I wasn't there, where there was a frustration in the fact that we become complacent. We changed something and we took a stand, and now that it was changed, then okay, I don't have to do it anymore. And that is the same thing when it comes to Ottawa. If we're going to take a stand as a province, then we need to take a stand. We can't become complacent. We need to continue to fight and get things, or achieve the things that we need as a province in order for us to prosper. And the grassroots people and the rural people play a key role in that, no matter whether you're in Alberta or Saskatchewan or right across the country.
Yeah, it's the small towns that want to maintain, I want to say, traditional family values, true conservative type values.
Mm-hmm.
And inside of this, we keep being accused of being racists, or that we don't want to support other communities. And what's amazing about that is how many charities that I've worked along with, and it's typically along conservative type people in working towards their community, or the people that are willing to give. And when I talk to the liberal minded and say, well, when's the last time you've even given to a charity? Oh, well, it's been a couple of years. Really? So you think that I should be giving away more of my taxes to support more of your ideals when you won't even take more of your own paycheck to support your own ideals? Like, how is that fair, right? Whereas what we see inside of, again, the traditional family values, the people out inside of rural Alberta, we see them as the strongholds for conservatives. Now, there's a seat potentially opening up for the new leader of the NDP party, which we're still not going to know for another month or so. In Lethbridge. Who do you think's first off going to be the new leader of the NDP?
You know what? That's it's really hard to say. I mean, looking at all the comments on social media and looking at the news reports, of course, everybody's pointing towards Nenshi. You know what? I don't know. But for me, quite honestly, I don't care. If conservatives want to continue to move forward and take a stand, and you need to get involved. You need to show that you're behind this government and this leadership and your MLA. And quite honestly, if Nenshi decides to run in that open spot, if he is the winner, I hope rural Alberta takes a stand, steps up, and really sends a message. Wouldn't that send a message to the NDP if Nenshi ran in that area and lost to the UCP? That would be huge.
And I think he's a part of his own problem on the same thing, because I think it was during the Lethbridge leadership debate, is Nenshi wouldn't even commit to running for a seat with the NDP if he wasn't elected as the leader. So the only way that he would go through an election cycle to even try this is if he was elected the leader of the NDP. Because if he's not the leader, he's going to fade back out of politics. And I think that's the biggest message, and that comes from his mouth direct and inside of a constituency that he wants to run for leadership in. So he wants to be their member of legislative assembly, but at the same time, if he loses on the leadership, he's not even going to bother.
Is that really a bad thing, though? Quite honestly, I've talked to too many people that have lived in Calgary that didn't like Nenshi as a mayor.
So he does have some support. No, and I get that, and he's got a very good strategic team, and I get that as well. But I think it says a lot more about Nenshi in that he doesn't want to be a part of the party unless he's the leader of the party.
Well,
right?
That says a lot about your character, though, doesn't it? Right?
That's exactly it.
And to me, that just tells me that the actual voter themselves or the membership is if you're not going to vote for me, then you're completely irrelevant. I'm not going to take a stand. Whereas I think it should be the opposite way around. If they're not going to vote for you, you need to ask why and what can I do to represent the people of the community and grow this message. And it just seems like he's not willing to do that.
Yeah, and then if you look at people like Hoffman, and I think she makes a really good case, we don't need an outsider coming into our party to try and change things or try and get us elected.
Yeah.
And of course they took that all as being racist and even tried to slam Hoffman as racist. And I think that Hoffman is a lot of things that I'll, kind of save my thoughts on. But I don't think that she is necessarily racist. Not that anything that she showed, but basically her voice wasn't about the color of Nenshi's skin or that he is Muslim, and that he says "insalab" more than he says, by God's way or whatever. We know the vote that he's going for in the demographics that he's shooting for. In part of that, he believes that he can capture a lot more of those votes, and I don't doubt that he can. For an NDP voting base, but at the same time, like I said, Hoffman has basically made the same comment, and I agree with her. If you guys are such a terrible party that your leader causes the party to basically collapse, and you got to hire somebody from outside as a populist to get you guys possibly seats in future elections, your party sucks.
Well, and at the end of the day, I mean, you have to look at the provincial. They're trying really, really hard right now to separate themselves from the federal faction of the party. But we all know that the NDP right across the country all answer to the federal organization. So now Nenshi coming on board and saying what he said, um, he's made it no secret. It's not, he's being open and transparent. So now it's up to the NDP supporters of whether or not they're going to buy his message and support him in what he's doing, or they're actually going to, say, you know what, you're right. We don't need you. I don't know, but it's going to be interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd hope that a lot of the NDP would actually look at the situation and go, does our party suck so bad that we have to bring somebody in from outside of the party to try and get back into any sort of power? Because if that's the case, maybe we're not a part of this. But at the same time, a lot of the NDP aren't known for being logical. They're more emotional based than they are off of factual information. Union support. Now, we talked briefly about this, and you brought up something that was really interesting. So the unions support the NDP supports the unions. But you brought up a really interesting fact about this when we chatted the other day in who collects the union dues. So we've got about 10 minutes left in our cast here. Can you break this out? Because this to me is absolutely mind-boggling in how and why the government would want to see more unions inside of Canada instead of less, which would be potentially better. Well, and this is on public, or is this on public and private?
You're talking about the collection?
The collection of the union dues.
Yeah. Well, see, originally what happened was it's called the Rand decision, and the Rand decision was based off of a private corporation. It was actually ruling against the Ford Motor Company, where they had to pay the union dues. And what I find interesting is the Rand decision didn't have anything to do with public service. So all of a sudden now you've got the federal and provincial governments collecting union dues for the unions through the payroll system, and using the Rand decision as the basis for that. But yet, if I'm wrong, please, hopefully somebody will provide me with the information. But at the end of the day, my thoughts are this: if the Rand decision is based off of collecting dues from private corporations, then why are our governments doing that? My position is this: I understand the need for unions. I get that. Typically they represent 1% of their workforce. The other, 98% don't use their unions for representation or whatever. But why wouldn't, if I've got to belong to a union, why wouldn't I pay my union dues directly to my union? That way my union is accountable for what I want and what I believe. Now, in saying that, when you look at that, I've talked to a lot of nurses right across the country who, for whatever reason, that they, we go back to the vaccination, they refuse to get vaccinated, and their unions refused to fight for them, yet they were paying their union dues. Well, where's that accountability? Where's that transparency? So at the end of the day, like I said, and this is both federal and provincial, the Rand decision is what is the basis of the collection of the union dues from the government to the unions, and it's done right through payroll.
And just to clear this all up, is that the provincial governments through their federal payroll collect the union dues. That goes up federally, and then federally they'll pump it back down to the unions. So this money is basically washed twice, once through the province, once through the feds, before it gets back to the unions. But it also gives a lot of transparency for the governments to see what the unions are actually taking off the checks, and they have an idea of how big these war chests for the unions are, right? And there's a couple more points that I want to make about the union dues, and especially when it comes to public sector. Now, if you work in a union shop in Canada, there's a couple of things. The first thing is whether you're a member of the union or not a member of the union, you're still forced to pay the same union dues, right? Yes, and I think that's terrible. So you don't want to be a part of the birthday committee, or let's call it the public works rainbow celebrations. You shouldn't have to contribute to that, but the unions, you absolutely have to, whether you're a part or not. So you can't even make a decision on that. And then second thing is new legislation that was just put through, proposed by the NDP, put through, I believe, by the Liberals, is their new anti-scab legislation. And what the anti-scab legislation basically does is it makes it, if the unions go on strike, if you're a non-union member, you can't cross the picket line. You're called a scab, right? So what this basically means is if you work at a union shop, public domain, public Crown Corp, you decide you don't want to be a part of the union, they're going to take your money anyways. In the situation like the nurses, they're not going to fight for you. But if they go on strike, you're on strike with them because you don't get to go back to work either. It's I can't think of a better definition for outright extortion
Well,
than what we see in public unions. These are the people that get to dictate safety, policy, times, holidays, sick days. These are the government. And if we can't rely on the government to treat their employees fair, then we need a new government. We don't need a fucking union inside of public works.
Well, the whole purpose of the unions was, protect the workers on health issues, et cetera, and fair wages. I understand that, and I get that. It's about that open transparency, and the public service unions should be there to support their members and protect them. But in saying that, we're seeing far too often right now where unions are getting involved in, as you said in our discussion, they're getting involved in protests when it comes to Israel or LGBTQ or all of these other issues. And I've talked to the nurses that belong to UNA here in Alberta that have said that their union is taking a position for them politically that they don't agree with, but they don't have a say. They don't have a voice. And I find it particularly interesting now that we talked about the NDP. A number of years ago, UNA had a convention up in Edmonton, and the only speaker that was allowed to speak there politically was Rachel Notley. But yet this wasn't a political sort of campaign. And so many, having talked to the people that participated in this meeting, they were frustrated because this wasn't supposed to be a political campaign, and that's exactly what it turned out to be. So, more transparency for the unions would be valuable. More accountability to the members of those unions would be valuable. And at the end of the day, I think there needs to be some questions asked both provincially and federally about the collection of these dues and the RAND decision and its interpretation and how it applies to governments.
Or even how the funds can be used, because UNA is the one that gave the AFL a couple $100,000 to have the anti-Alberta pension plan meetings. So they were literally funding the provincial MLAs for the NDP to have an anti-APP rally, and they, the whole hands off our money thing. And where I think that this is the most egregious, I'm going to say it, is that if you work for, again, a union shop, and it is part of one of the Crown corporations, you are part of a public union, is that your union fees, and unions always boast about the same thing. Unions have higher paying than you'd find in the private sector. So they say that, part of the benefit of being the union is you're going to make more money. So they negotiate for higher funds. Who pays those people but taxpayers? So if taxpayers are paying our union employees and their union dues are coming directly off of that and going back to the government, it's literally a taxation that taxpayers are paying that they never got a chance to agree to.
So, and quite honestly, neither did the members, because the union's executives aren't coming back to their members saying, you know what, we want to contribute to this or to or to that, or to this political cause. The executives are the ones making this decision, and it only comes to the union members when people are questioning why your union is fighting for this or fighting for that. So it becomes accountability to its membership. And I think that's important in a union. If I've got to belong to a union, where if I get a job with a government agency, I have no choice. I've got to join the union. That's part of the rules. Then my union executive needs to be accountable to the membership and answer these questions. And there needs to be that transparency. And I just sometimes feel that transparency isn't always above board.
Well, and my son worked for one of the railways, and they were going on strike for wages. And I said to my son, "Well, you'll probably get strike pay." And he said, "No, the unions are broke." I was like, "How are the unions broke? Where does all the money go? You're paying what is it, $100, $110 a month? It's whatever it is." But so let's call it $1,200 a year, $1,000 a year. Each member of the company that is paying $1,000 a year. They decide to go on strike instead of it's either one province or if we're there wherever they exist. And the unions somehow have run out of money. So where does all the money actually end up? Who gets to audit the unions in the end run to see where the cash has gone? Is there any open accountability for taxpayers to look into the unions? Because it is our money.
You know what? I honestly don't have the answer to that one. My immediate response would be no, because unions are what private. I believe to be they're private, and they're elected by their members. So at the end of the day, that accountability falls on the membership, and that transparency falls on the membership to ensure that their union executives are open and transparent, not only with them at a very minimum, but they should be open and transparent as a whole to the community. And we don't see that. And I'm not saying that I am pushing for that, but I do believe that union executives need to be accountable to its membership and where that money is going. Absolutely.
Well, and I'll still stick behind mine. It's a tax that we never agreed to pay to, but we're forced into being paid to. Is that every taxpayer it should be entitled to the same transparency. If I'm paying out money and my money is working against me, and I'm going to, do the same thing with, of course, they're unionized, a legacy media, then I want some transparency into what's going on inside of these actions. If the unions are taking our money and they're working against us in counter protests, against the 1 million person march, and through the LG, through the rainbow, whatever. They're supporting the pro-Palestinians, Fred Han, and this is a little bit about what you talked to about earlier. It's literally like chickens protesting for Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Well,
the idea is lunacy, but the fact that unions are using our funding to work against the ideology, they're working for the 1% against the 99% that are forcing that are paying their salaries.
Well, and that's why I was saying I don't believe that the RAND decision was ever meant to be for public service. And and I would encourage union members to look at the back pages of some of their agreements. Almost all of them, especially in Alberta, I've read through most of them. And most of them say that if the government ever decides to stop collecting our union dues, then they have to make some sort of accommodation to collect those dues from their members, which is interesting because I think that would probably hurt the unions more than anything. And when you have a public service union negotiating against its employer, and it's the citizens' money going into this, do you know what I mean? It's sort of it's hypocritical. As you say, it's taxpayers' money.
Yeah, no, exactly. Hey, we're at the 2 hour mark here. So, any final parting words about the event coming up, or for the AGM in November, or
You know
both?
what? Yeah, you know what? I hope people have the time to attend here on Saturday the 15th here in Red Deer. It's going to be a fun event. It's going to be a lot of information. There's going to be a lot of, from what I understand, most of the speakers are going to be available to have one-on-one conversations and talk about where we are as a country, where we are as a military, and where our military is going from here. And then, you know what? I encourage people, especially grassroots people here in Alberta, get involved. The AGM for the UCP is coming up here November 1st and 2nd. I encourage people to attend, make sure their voices are heard. And they're replacing a number of positions on the provincial board for the UCP. You know, talk to the people that are going to put their names forward, learn what they're about, learn what they have to say, and make sure that you get involved and at least vote for that. That's an absolute minimum. But get informed and participate. And I hope that everybody comes out here on the 15th.
Awesome. One more thing I'm going to mention about the AGM is that there is some early bird seats on sale. I think they go to $300 or $400 after the early bird seats, and I think the cutoff is June 19th. So if you're planning on going to the November event, get your tickets now, because I think they're like $150 with the meal. So
that's right, and you can get them at ucpagm.ca.
Yeah. So get there early, pick up a couple of tickets, and I'll be at both events. So I'll see you at both of those, and hopefully we'll have some time for some other conversations in the meantime and in between time. Anyways, Kelly, I want to thank everybody that's hopped on the call. Looks like we have about a couple hundred people that have viewed today. So I want to thank everybody that's taken some time to listen to me and Kelly talk. And Kelly, from last night to tonight, thanks for affording yourself some time to just come out and have a conversation with me. It's greatly appreciated, my friend.
Thank you, and thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
All right, for everybody else, I will have Stuart Stottinger on at 6 o'clock. That's the plan. I haven't touched base with him yet today, so I think that's still going. But have a great day, and we'll hopefully see you then. Bye now.